Imagine you're sitting at your desk, sipping your coffee, and you suddenly hear the term defeasance clause being tossed around in a financial podcast. You might think, what on earth is that? Well, you're not alone. The world of finance is filled with jargon that can sound like a foreign language, and the defeasance clause is one of those terms that can leave many scratching their heads. So, let's break it down together, and trust me, it's going to be more interesting than it sounds. At its core, a defeasance clause is a contractual provision. It's like a safety net for bond issuers, a way for them to discharge their obligations to bondholders using alternative collateral or security. Think of it as a get out of jail free card for companies or governments that issue bonds. They can pay off their debt earlier than expected without incurring penalties, and that's a big deal in the financial world. Now, let's take a step back and understand what a bond is. When companies or governments need money, they often issue bonds. A bond is essentially a loan that investors give to the issuer, who promises to pay back that loan with interest over time. Bondholders, the people who buy these bonds, expect regular interest payments and eventually their original investment back. But what if the issuer wants to pay off that bond early? That's where the defeasance clause comes into play. Here's how it works. The issuer sets aside a specific amount of money in a trust fund, often invested in low-risk securities like U.S. Treasury bonds. This trust generates enough income to make those interest payments to bondholders. So, when the issuer wants to pay off the bond early, they simply use the money in that trust to settle their obligations. Once that's done, the bondholders have no further claims against the issuer, and the issuer can breathe a sigh of relief. Now, you might be wondering, what's in it for the issuer? Well, there are several advantages to having a defeasance clause. First and foremost, it can lead to significant cost savings. By paying off their debt early, issuers can avoid higher interest payments over time. It's a bit like paying off your credit card debt before the interest compounds. Smart financial management. Additionally, having a defeasance clause can increase a bond's market value. Investors feel more secure knowing that there's a plan in place for repayment, making the bond more attractive to potential buyers. Plus, paying off debt early can improve the issuer's credit rating, which can lead to better terms for future financing. It's a win-win situation. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some drawbacks to consider. Setting up a defeasance clause can be costly. Maintaining that trust fund requires administrative work and investment costs, which might be passed on to bondholders in the form of higher interest rates. It can also be complex, particularly for novice investors who might find the terms and conditions difficult to understand. And let's not forget the risk factor. Even with a trust set up, there's always a chance that the issuer might default on their payments. If the trust doesn't generate enough income, bondholders could be left holding the bag. Now, let's clarify a common misconception. A defeasance clause does not mean the issuer is off the hook entirely. Just because they have this clause doesn't guarantee they can walk away from their obligations. There are specific conditions that must be met, and if they aren't, the issuer may still be required to repay the debt in full, along with any interest and penalties. You might be surprised to learn that defeasance clauses aren't just for big corporations. They can also be negotiated by smaller businesses and even individual borrowers. So, if you're a small business owner looking to secure a loan, don't shy away from asking about a defeasance clause. It could provide you with some much needed flexibility down the road. Now, let's dive into the history of the term. The phrase defeasance clause derives from the Latin word defeasant, meaning to annul or make void. Initially, it was used in real estate law, allowing borrowers to repay loans early without penalties. Over the years, its application has expanded into various financial contexts, becoming a staple in the world of bonds and loans. But how does this all relate to accounting? In accounting, a defeasance clause plays a significant role in how debts are reported. When a company uses a defeasance clause, the debt can be classified as a long-term liability rather than a current liability. This distinction is crucial for financial reporting as it impacts the balance sheet and the overall financial health of the entity. Let's look at some real-world examples to illustrate how this works. Picture ABC Corporation, which issued a $10 million bond with a 10-year maturity. After 5 years, they decide they no longer need the funds and want to retire the bond early. By setting up a defeasance escrow with low-risk securities, they can pay off the bond without incurring a default. This not only improves their financial position, but also enhances their creditworthiness for future borrowing. Or consider XYZ Inc., which issued a $15 million bond with a 7-year maturity. After 4 years, they want to retire the debt early. They set up a defeasance escrow, transferring high-quality bonds into it, allowing them to retire the bond without defaulting. This is a strategic move that can help them manage their finances more effectively. Now, you may be wondering, why is it important to understand these clauses? For issuers, knowing the ins and outs of defeasance clauses can provide them with options for refinancing and restructuring their debts. For bondholders, understanding these clauses is vital to protect their investments. They need to know the conditions under which the issuer can retire the bonds and ensure their investment is secure. But here's the kicker, defeasance clauses are not always required. Some companies choose not to include them in their bond issuances or loan agreements for various reasons. It can be expensive to set up and maintain the necessary trust, and some companies prefer to manage their debt in more traditional ways. So, if you're ever faced with the term defeasance clause, don't panic. It's a powerful tool in the world of finance that can provide flexibility and security for both issuers and investors. Understanding it can empower you to make informed decisions, whether you're a corporate finance executive or an individual looking to navigate the complexities of loans and bonds. In conclusion, the defeasance clause is more than just a piece of legal jargon. It's a crucial element in the financial landscape that can significantly impact how debts are managed and reported. So, the next time you hear about it, you'll know exactly what it means and why it matters. And who knows, you might even impress your friends with your newfound knowledge of finance.